And now we're pleased to ask Richard Klipin to join us on stage again for the launch of the FSC policy platform Blueprint for Growth. Richard.
Kia ora, thank you, David, and thank you, Minister. It's a fantastic segue from the Minister's comments in terms of policy, because, as I signalled a little earlier, policy is so fundamental to how we think about what are the priorities, what are the things we want to change, how do we bring collective wisdom to shifting the dial. I signalled a little earlier, we've done lots of research. People are telling us what they want. People are telling us what they're unhappy with. And around the FSC, we're starting to think about how do we actually inform and actually create and drive, and in some cases try and lead the policy conversation. So back in 2021, the FSC board signed off the new FSC strategy, which is not that new anymore, but there were two major things that we took on as a challenge. The first one is we said we have to actually get into the consumer conversation. And in fact, we completely reframed our purpose and our vision. And our vision is to help grow the financial confidence and well-being of all Kiwis. So it's a very consumer-led conversation. So we've done a huge amount of research there. We launched the ISWA campaign. We've got our Money and New websites. We've done Money and New research. There's a whole body of knowledge and a body of work to go towards how do we help New Zealanders with their financial confidence and well-being. We've outreached to lots of not-for-profits, some of them in the room today, some in the room tonight. It's just been a fantastic journey, but we've only scratched the surface. On the policy front, in many ways it's been very challenging because we haven't been a policy shop, if you will. And being a policy shop brings a different kind of piece to think about. And so, when I start thinking about policy, I'm thinking about grand visions. And I thought I'd share 3 grand visions that have transformed sectors and industries and countries. The first one was when President Kennedy said in the space race, ignited the space race and said, we need to build a rocket that gets to the moon and comes back. Grand vision, grand policy, all the stuff that played out after that fact completely transformed America's capability and knowledge and insights in how they thought about the space race. The second one, and having just come out of London, and the London transport system's fabulous, I'm sure many of you have travelled on the metros. 1867, they started the London tube system. It's one of the best mass transit systems in the world. People opt mostly to travel by tube or by metro rather than by car. Again, think about the transformative nature about how that thinks about how people live their lives, where they live, how cities develop, the fact that you can live half an hour out of town, 2 hours out of town, and still work in the city. We know, I'm sure, lots of people who are in those kind of circumstances. And the third grand vision to share with you, speaking about Aussie love, comes out of the Australian superannuation system. I was working when the Hawke Keating government came to power. They were a transformative, fundamental government that introduced, in this case, superannuation reform. In 1992, they started at 3%, it's now 11%, and the system is at about $3.5 trillion. The ability to leverage into infrastructure and build and develop and grow out of the super system is just massive. We have the next panel might pick up some of those things. Average retirement nest egg, it is very different for men and women. That's part of our D&I conversation. But for people hitting retirement, it's about between $250,000 and $320,000. In New Zealand, it's 10% of that. So when you're thinking about an aspiration about building consumer confidence and people hitting retirement, how do we get people to think about this? Well, that's a big transformative policy. That's the grand vision. But policy doesn't only happen in the big grand vision space. Policy happens when you respond to regulation. And it's my absolute pleasure today to call out and signal the whole FSC reg community that's sitting in the room. We've been building and growing our capability in thinking about regulatory reform, responding to regulatory reform, engaging with regulators, engaging with key stakeholders and decision makers. Carissa Pirano leads that effort, and there's a lot of people in this room who sit on those committees and help inform and engage. In the last 12 months, we put together 16 reg responses to help and inform and drive and lead policy. So we've been very active in the policy space, but it hasn't been in the big vision space. It's been in the minutiae, it's been in the drafting, it's been in the legalese. And there's lots of expertise in this room and outside of this room that have kind of helped us with that. The other thing, in terms of helping to shape policy, is when crisis arrives. And Minister Robertson spoke about that. Former Minister Farfoy is in the room together, and in the COVID, right in the middle of the COVID crisis, right up front, I think we all remember, people just ran for the hills. There was huge cashing out, fleeing out of markets and going to cash. There was a huge spike in withdrawals and KiwiSaver withdrawal inquiries. And I remember that we had a lot of conversations with the Minister and with MBA going, well, when you're all locked down, how do you actually fulfill the withdrawal process? Like, how do you actually evidence stuff in front of a JP? Well, you can't. So again, policy was created in times of crisis so that common sense prevailed. And all of those things, all these things, the big vision of policy, the helping to draft and helping to inform submissions, the building relationships with key influencers and decision makers, the being available and being present in times of crisis, kind of all go into this idea of helping to shape and guide policy. But we've decided as an organisation to head into the things we've already been doing, but heading into the big vision piece, because what's clear out of the answer to the question of it's been 6 years since a proper KiwiSaver review, as partly representing the sector, you can't put stuff on ice. You can't not review things that need to be continued to be nurtured and evolved and grown and distilled. It needs a big vision. It needs policy leadership to go, hey, we're only on the foothills of where we need to be. How do we shift the dial? What's the process? What's the thinking? What's the grand vision? And so today it's my absolute pleasure to launch what we're calling the Blueprint for Growth. Blueprint for Growth is our attempt with our board, with our CEO forums, with our expertise sitting inside all of our sectors to help shape and guide and influence the policy debate, both at the minutiae level, at the relationship level, but certainly at the big vision level. And I'm going to just share with you very briefly how that plays out. So, again, the FSC hasn't had a track record of sitting around and going, hey, we know what policy looks like in the big vision stuff. So we started with key principles. The three key principles were around sustainable, integrated, and aspirational. And these are the things that are guiding how we think about what we do with policy. Now, the FSC is an umbrella organisation. Under our umbrella sits the life insurance sector and the health insurance sector, the KiwiSaver sector. We're spending a lot of time thinking about financial advice. We're thinking a lot of time thinking about how we inform the consumer conversation. And what we started with was a problem statement. And you can see the problem statements there on the screen. New Zealanders aren't making enough of the right financial decisions. We see that in all the data. We see the fact that people can't find $5,000 in an emergency if they really had to. We see it in the fact that people worry about money daily, weekly, or monthly. So this is the data and insight that we're getting from a lot of our research, and it's not just our research; it's a fairly common theme. But we've built in an aspiration in terms of what we want to achieve. We want Kiwis to be better with money and to seek guidance and advice when they need it. We're huge believers in the value of advice. Good advice, we know, transforms. It's like a good coach. They help you make the right decisions. They stop you making bad decisions. The data is really clear. You get better returns and better outcomes, and you get better goodwill and certainly better confidence out of the decisions that you make. We know that New Zealand is underinsured. Again, all of our data says that the happy-go-lucky, she'll be right, it's all going to be fine. We saw when Cyclone Gabrielle turned up, the stories of people who were crowdfunding for solutions or couldn't find the money or were reaching out to friends and family. It's great evidence of the need to think about how do you manage risk in your life. There's property risks and there's car risks, there's life risks, there's health risks. How do you actually manage those things, and how do you think about, well, what's the right amount? So that's a key part of our thinking. There's clarity around Kiwis aren't really prepared for retirement. Again, Jane, there was a fantastic masterclass led yesterday. We work really closely with Jane and the Retirement Commission. This is a shared piece of work with lots of people around the sector. But if we're going to help Kiwis have dignity in retirement, we need to help them on their journey to make the right decisions. And the right decisions don't happen when you're 55. The right decisions happen when you take your first job out. That's one of the reasons why this kind of COVID investing generational online platform thing is so exciting, because it introduced a whole new generation of Kiwis into the idea of investing and saving and what to do with it. And so that becomes a really important part of what we want to focus on. And of course, the piece around healthcare is that Kiwis worry hugely about health affordability, health at the right time. There are 2 breakout sessions on today. I've sat in the briefing sessions. It's pretty confronting stuff when you turn your health system upside down in the middle of a pandemic. And how do we actually manage for that? How do we ensure that the public and the private sector actually sit together to help all Kiwis, both in the preventative side, but certainly in their times of strife and in times of need? And again, we all got powerful stories of people. You never know when you need your health professionals until you really, really need them. And that's when you want a system you can trust. That's when you want the access. So as a package of thinking around policy things that we want to change, it sits on this slide. Often to get to this level of simplicity, it's pretty easy to say, okay, well, that's great. Tick, we agree with all of that. What sits underneath that? And so this is a work in progress. So today we're launching the Blueprint for Growth. Sitting underneath the blueprint are, within all of our KiwiSaver, our life insurance and health insurance, professional advice committees are, how do we now bring that aspiration to life? What are some of the key influencing pieces? So just take KiwiSaver, for example. We're well past due the debate around should it be mandatory or not. We're well past due about what's the right level to contribute. If you're starting your working life at point A and you're retiring at point B, what's the right number to have? We're well past the point of thinking about, where does a risk portfolio sit in people's lives who take out mortgages, who need cover when they need it, who need access to good health care. And these are the kind of debates that we totally want to be leading and talking about. Some of it's transformative, some of it's more in the weeds, but it's not a 3-year conversation. It's a start of a conversation that might take a generation. It might be our kids sitting in this room going, well, we made a good start, but we're not quite there yet. In much the same way that some of us were sitting in the room when KiwiSaver was founded 15 years ago. $100 billion is fantastic progress. But at $30,000 each, it's only scratching the surface. So it's kind of taking the long-term view, and I think it's the sector that owns that responsibility. So let me close by saying the FSC is now in the business of thinking about policy, the big visions, continuing our work in the specifics, continuing to work closely with our colleagues, many of you whom are here in the room today, so welcome to all of you, whether you're in the regulators, whether you're in MB, whether you're in Treasury, whether you're in IRD. We really appreciate your engagement, and we really look forward to working with you, because this in our view is a nation-building project. It's a collective effort. The sector can't do it on its own. But in the absence of people thinking about this, we need to step forward, we need to lead, and people need to come with us. And on that note, Kia ora, thank you very much.